Well, you couldn't have picked a better day to think about how happiness happens, because we're going to tune in to one of my favorite scriptures. I'm not kidding. It is one of the great stories about stress in the Bible. Now, if you never have any stress, God bless you. Maybe let the rest of us know what to do, and post your prayer needs in the comment section before you leave. But if you can stay around, if you've got 7 minutes to join me, open your Bibles or just listen in as I read Luke chapter 10, verse 38. Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, and they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Mary sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he taught. But Martha, who was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing, she came to Jesus and she said, "Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me." But the Lord said to her, "My dear Martha, you are worried and distracted with all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her." Now, gospel writer Luke embedded in his first sentence a few hints about the personality of Martha. He said Martha welcomed Jesus into her home. Martha was the one-person welcoming committee. Not Martha and Mary, not Martha and Mary and Lazarus, just Martha. Now, in my imagination, I can just see her standing on the porch, welcoming Jesus into her home. Not their home, hers. Lazarus lives there. Mary lives there. But this is Martha's domain. And this is Martha's moment. Wide open arms. Come in, come in, come in. This is a big day. And Martha has in mind what Luke said was a big dinner, verse 40. Now imagine Martha busy in the kitchen, just throwing open the wooden shutters, looking into the adjacent room, seeing all the disciples chatting and laughing and talking. "Dinner might be late," she shouts to them, and Jesus looks up and he smiles. "No problem, no problem." And Martha feverishly sets about the task of making this big dinner. All the while, Jesus is sitting on the edge of his chair in the other room, telling a story. Maybe he's telling a story about a prodigal son. The disciples are smiling at the thought of a wealthy Jewish boy who ended up feeding pigs. Oh, the irony. And right smack in the front of him, sitting cross-legged on the floor, there's Mary, Martha's baby sister. "Oh, pigs?" she asks. "Yes, pigs," Jesus affirms. Through the open wooden shutters, Martha sees Mary, and she sees Jesus. She sees her sister laughing. She sees Jesus gearing up to tell yet another story, and that's when it dawns on Martha. Why isn't Mary helping me? Mary could have cut the carrots. Mary could have washed the celery. Mary could do something, right? So Martha turns up the heat on the soup, and she feels the heat rise in her heart. Did her sister not know there was work to be done? The silverware is still in the drawer. The glasses are still in the pantry. Martha releases an audible sigh, and she carries an armful of plates into the room and sets them loudly on the table. But no response. No one notices her. She feels her jaw tighten as she returns to the kitchen to stir the soup. Within moments, she marches back into the living room. with the wooden spoon still in her hand, and she slaps it in her palm, demanding, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. All conversation stops. A dozen sets of eyes turn. Mary looks down. Jesus looks up. Martha, cheeks flushed with anger, scowls. Her words hang in the air like a scrape of a fingernail on a chalkboard. What had happened to hospitable Martha, to welcoming Martha? Well, Luke gives us the answer. Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. Again, that's in verse 40. She had big plans to make a big impression with her big event. Instead, she made a big mess, and she became worried and upset over all these details of all the ironies. Martha was in the presence of the Prince of Peace, yet she was the picture of stress. What happened? Is there a takeaway lesson from Martha's meltdown? Is it that it is a sin to cook? That hospitality is the devil's tool? No. The Bible makes a big deal out of parties and banquets. That it was wrong for her to expect Mary to help? Of course not. Of course not. Martha's downfall was not her work, was not her request. It seems to me it was her motivation. I can't help but think that she wasn't serving Jesus, that she was more performing for Jesus. She wasn't making a meal for him. She was making a big deal out of her service. She was suckered in with the subtlest of lies, self-promotion. Self-promotion. Self-promotion is all about self. Look what I've done. Look what I've made. Look what I've accomplished. Self-promotion has little room for others. She just sits, Martha said. Self-promotion, even bosses, tell them to get to work. Not a pretty sight, right? Martha in that moment was not a pleasant person. Of the two sisters in the story, which would you rather spend time with, Martha or Mary? That's a relevant question. Might there be a Martha among us? Might there be a bit of Martha within us? Does our service for Jesus ever turn us into scowling grumps? It's a slippery slope, this thing of self-promotion. What begins as a sincere desire to serve Christ metastasizes into an act of impressing people. And when that happens, gifted Marthas become miserable mumblers. And it's easy to see why, right? If your happiness depends upon the applause and approval of others, you'll yo-yo up and down based on the fickle opinion of people. And believe me, it is fickle. If you're noticed, you'll strut. If you're unnoticed, you'll grumble. If your desire is to be noticed, then it'll make you miserable. And if it's making you miserable, well, you can bet it's doing the same for others. Don't be a Martha. Get back to the basics. Happiness happens when our focus is not on ourselves, but on the presence of Jesus. Today, take your sights off the applause of others and set your sights on the Prince of Peace. And trust me, you'll be happier as a result. Have a great day.